Hi, I am DJ Ghetto Steve. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. I am currently in the middle of a series on homeschoolers in their own words. So we've been talking to a lot of former evangelical fundamentalist homeschoolers, as well as a couple of people who use the same curriculum but in a Christian school context. Now, today's interview is specifically with someone who went through the ACE curriculum in a private school setting, but then his children were educated through ACE as a homeschool option. So, this should be a very interesting perspective on things since he has been both the parent and the child. So, here we go.
I went from third grade to graduating through ACE.
That's one that I have had trouble getting a hold of. Like ATI I've found, Bob Jones I've found, Abeka I've found, but ACE has been harder for me to track down without actually like buying it.
Yeah.
So what did you, just kind of overall, what did you think of how it approached materials? Did you see any specific opportunities? Anything you really liked about it?
I think the main thing was it was a lot of fill in and multiple choice and not a lot of, writing. It
Yeah.
was mostly just answering almost like a Scantron form, but, it was we called it a PACE, a packet of accelerated Christian education. And the tests were really just very rudimentary memorization kind of
Yes.
thing. And so there wasn't a lot of critical thinking or, trying to work through problems other than, of course, math.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, math's pretty straightforward, but all the other curriculum was pretty much fill in the blanks or multiple choice, and just memorization.
Yeah. Because that was something that really changed for me between my homeschool studies and then my college studies. Like, I hated history while I was homeschooling. Absolutely hated it because it was nothing but memorizing names and dates and
Hmm.
places. And I am terrible at that. So bad. To this day, I have to meet someone like 7 times before I actually remember their name. Like I don't do well with those. And so when I got into college, I had history professors that gave so much more context and like so much more of the stories behind that particular date or that particular person, and suddenly it was so exciting because I had all this rich information to make me actually care about whatever the topic was that I just didn't get when I was reading through timelines and answering little quizzes at the end.
Yeah, and that was for me too was really great when I got out of, because it's all self-paced. You're just working on your own. You put your flag up, someone comes and helps you. Take your flag down, they'll help you. And then being in a classroom, an actual classroom setting where the charisma of the teacher who's had experience, trying to bring this material alive, and the participation of multiple people around you asking questions and just asking questions that you hadn't thought of, right?
Right.
So, I mean, the more people that are in the class, the more you're able to like even learn because you've got all these other minds all trying to learn the same thing at the same time. I struggled a little bit with that transition from, we set what we called an office, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really just a little desk with sides on it, and we called it dividers
Yeah.
on it, and you just were in your little space and had no interaction during the learning parts of you had PE and that kind of thing where you
Yeah.
had interaction within groups. But for the learning portion of my education from third grade all the way through to my senior year, it was all self-paced, self-graded. You went up and you graded your own tests. But yeah, I think I learned a lot better in the classroom environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it was like really good practice for cubicle farm jobs.
Yeah. Which didn't really go into vogue until, a decade and a half or 2 decades
That's
later.
true. That's true. It's it's interesting to see that you can have people who homeschool, but homeschool with like a co-op or support group or something like that. And you have these homeschoolers that, while they're only interacting with other homeschoolers, they are actually participating in group learning. And then you have the group education that you ended up with, where you were still cut off from everybody and you didn't get that same group energy.
Right. The only places you did was in music class where, you're singing in choir or
Mm-hmm.
something, or in physical education or practicing basketball, and then during breaks, of course, when you have a break time, you could have with your friends at the table or something, but
Right.
pretty much everything else was. And I guess there could be a positive aspect to that because when you did have a question, you had one-on-one attention
Yeah.
for answering it. But yeah, I think that the positive versus the negative, I think the group classroom learning is much more productive
Yeah.
than this self-paced, and I say paced kind of a learning.
Well, and it ends up leaving you feeling kind of lonely because you might be struggling on a particular topic and you assume that everybody else is doing it just fine. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of room for intrusive thoughts and negative cognitions to start taking root, just simply because you don't have any reinforcement of you're not alone. You're not the only person that is struggling with something. Like, we all have something. And it takes a while for us to kind of figure that out about people because it seems like, ooh, well, they've totally got it all together. Like, I wish
Yeah.
I could be like
Well, I
that.
was also the only senior in my class.
Oh, no.
So I was valedictorian, salutatorian,
Right?
every Atorian you can be, class president, president of the yearbook committee. I mean,
I
it was
joked
just it was
that,
just me.
yeah, I joked that I was the king and queen of prom. So, when you're looking at your performance in college, did you find that you had any specific gaps, anything that you needed like extra tutoring or anything for as you were kind of making that adjustment to college level education?
I was fortunate enough that in my writing
Mm-hmm.
that I we had an actual accredited teacher in the because you didn't these ACE doesn't require accreditation of anybody.
Right.
You just use the paces. But in the school I went to, we had an actual accredited teacher, and he was a stickler on writing. And so my writing was pretty good when I got into college, but everything else I was behind.
Mm-hmm.
I was behind, specifically math, science, social studies. Because it's only concentrating on one view of history, and that's the Christian story and how
Mm-hmm.
they wanted it to be taught. So there's a lot of things that I look science,
Mm-hmm.
all of that I was behind. So actually, I went to community college to begin with. I
Oh,
had to
good.
actually go for a couple of years just to get myself up to where I
Mm-hmm.
could even qualify to go into the actual college courses. So yeah, I was significantly behind, and even in the writing, I had one teacher. It was a chemistry teacher. Asked me if I was dyslexic, which
Oh.
I'm not. Which I'm not. But the way that I was writing things was so different from everybody else around me that he was trying to piece together why is Trevor coming across this way. He's
Mm-hmm.
obviously intelligent, but he doesn't fit in. Just even by the results of what I was producing, for the
Yeah.
for the quizzes and essays and stuff was not. It was different than
Mm-hmm.
everybody else. So I had to kind of. I think like junior, senior year of high school, I kind of was like retaking in order to come up to speed. So yeah, significant impact to my
Yeah.
college.
Because I know that was Man, my freshman year, I had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, so it really does not surprise me looking back that I graduated high school and was like, yes, I'm not only going to go to a college that is at least known within the Christian circles as having really high academic standards, I'm going to be pre med and I'm going to be honors. And I was so in over my head. Like, there was so much for me to adjust to. And I just had these like mountains of homework and everything. And it was so overwhelming. And I had taken a couple of community college classes like my senior year to get like speech, and I think I took a computer class because I had been raised on Mac and they were only going to have Windows at my college. So I
Uh,
had to figure out how to use Windows. But
I actually had that same experience. It was all Mac, and then it was all PCs. Yeah.
yep. It's really funny because I was gung ho for Mac, even up through like the end of high school. But then I got to college and we actually had a school provided computer with internet access in our dorm room. And I got to playing around with like different apps that you could install. Like there were so many free apps for Windows versus Mac. And I was just like, oh, all this stuff is available to me. And then I started learning how to like monsterize and build your own PCs. And
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
got into information technology after college, and it just spiraled out of control from there. But yeah, I really took on a lot, and I did not expect to struggle the way that I did at all. It was really
Well,
kind of
it's a
an
completely
emotional
different
thing.
environment. It's a
Yeah.
completely different environment, and you've been successful. You have every reason to believe that confidence in yourself,
Mhm.
that you're going to be able to do this. You can take it all on, and you're in a completely alien world, thrown in, not prepared. And yeah, I mean, I get it. I empathize.
Well, because like you don't even realize, because you have not stepped foot enough outside your bubble before then, you don't realize just how different things were. And you start talking to other people, even other people that homeschooled, and it's so different, in good and bad ways. But you just have no concept of this, and then suddenly you're confronted with it, and you're like, I was told that there was one way to be Christian, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's a lot to take in all at once.
yeah. That's to me, that's one of the big problems with isolation. Isolating is, the intentions. I don't think are nefarious at all. It's
Yeah.
it's it's protecting and raising in a way that you want your children to go.
Hmm.
And when they eventually do, or when I eventually did get out into the real world, quote unquote, it was not what I was told that it was. What I was led to believe. It was not.
Exactly. It just so much was like very obviously wrong.
Mm.
One of my previous people that I interviewed, she described it this way, and I think it's so good. She said that these decisions for these, Christian worldview educations are just misdirected love. And I think that, every single homeschooling parent that I have ever talked to in my entire life, they are absolutely convinced that this is exactly what they need to be doing, and to do anything different would be a disservice to their children. So like, it's obvious that they care, but it's difficult
So
to, because you
yeah.
want to give them grace, but at the same time you want people to take accountability for the way that they have operated in the past, and try to work towards operating better in the future. But if everyone just has this rosy glow of, you know, I did the best I could. We still need to have some self-awareness there.
Yeah, my all my children were homeschooled after my ex and I separated.
Hmm.
She eventually pulled them all out of. They never went to public school. They went to in fact, the same Christian school that I had
Oh,
gone
okay.
to with ACE. But she eventually pulled them out of there, and the whole purpose was isolation,
Hmm.
was protecting against the world. It had nothing to do with love, from what I could tell. And
Yeah.
she was too busy as it was, being a single parent of 4 children. What ended up happening was that my oldest son ended up being the teacher of everybody.
Yeah.
And they grew to resent him, even till now, to where they hardly even talk to him because she couldn't do the necessary things to support the kids in homeschool. And
Right.
so it ended up being the oldest child ends up teaching everybody, which doesn't work.
No.
There's always going to be schism and kids not getting along and not agreeing with things. And you can't tell me what to do. You're just my
Oh,
brother.
yeah.
And it was a nightmare. And my youngest son is probably barely out of middle school level,
Hmm.
out of the homeschool. They were tested while they were in homeschool, and Nolan tested in the lower 12 percentile or something like
Oh
that.
my
And
gosh.
so I had gone to the state to see if we could like force the kids to get into a different school,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't do anything unless they were in the like bottom 5%. The
Oh,
state
good
wouldn't
gravy.
wouldn't like step in to try to create a different education environment. So he basically graduated. He graduated, but
Yeah.
with no education at all.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, he's just. And my oldest, who was the one who was teaching, he ended up getting a college degree, but he struggled the same way that I did
Yeah.
initially. But it was about isolation, 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 and that she even went so far as that, this group that I'm associated with now, who's all isolationists, are not isolationists enough, and so would pull out of that and then create, get another group
Yeah.
together, and then, oh no, these guys, they're allowing this thing, and so then she would go to this other, these extremes. So
Yes.
I, in that case, I think in that homeschooling environment was not love. It
That's
was
true.
all about protection
Hmm.
from the world and isolating, and not. I mean, there were some very twisted views on even how to introduce children to sexuality,
Yeah.
to where it was so extreme that she wanted the kids to discover it on their wedding night, to not
Yeah.
even know what they were getting themselves into.
Yeah.
That when they get married, then it's like, well, you guys go put your parts together. I'm not going to tell you how to do it or even what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it damaged those kids,
Oh,
and
100%.
and I had a similar experience, growing up the same way with isolation, as it wasn't quite as bad because we associated with other Christian schools. We
Right.
played ball but I think that misdirected love, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was
Yeah.
doing some research a couple days ago about the propensity of authoritarian and isolationist policies and just behaviors amongst homeschoolers and how that relates to instances of child abuse, domestic violence in future relationships, etc. And basically, everything came down to there is not enough data on homeschool families to really know a statistically significant amount of people to say this percentage are being abused. But they said that absolutely, especially when you look at Stephen Hassan's bite model, it absolutely ticks the boxes for things that are going to attract people who would use it for evil to push malfeasance, and that is rooted in some sort of twisted like idea of what children are for, They don't seem to recognize that they're whole human beings. You know, they're seen as the props to prove that I have reached certain milestones in my life, and they are to be a good reflection of me, so they need to be well behaved. But education just
Right.
it just doesn't get addressed in any meaningful way.
Yeah, I like that perspective, but because it really does mirror what happened with my children. Because she ended up getting a farm so she could,
Homesteading.
be away from society, and part of the purpose of all the kids was to keep the farm up.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right. So it there was the school work that they were supposedly doing, and then they had this list of chores that they had to get done before mom came home. Otherwise, they would get in trouble, and then that's where, and there was abuse in
Yeah.
that environment, and some that I didn't see.
Yeah.
While it was happening in real time, I'm only realizing it later. But yeah, and when the child misbehaves, it's reflective of the parent.
Mm-hmm.
What the parent do to make this child not be in control, and it just tightens the noose even more.
Yep. And there's so much social pressure in those circles for children to be held to adult standards. It's almost like they hit 9, 10, and they get like a just socially assumed bar mitzvah, and now they're adults, and
Yeah.
they have to behave like an adult, they have to think like an adult, they have to have emotional control like an adult, but no
But
one has
no
ever
no 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 sexual things like an adult,
Correct.
right? That's taboo, off limits.
Yes.
All that other stuff you said is true, but then you also have to isolate. Oh no, this thing is only
We
safe for
don't talk
later.
about it. It's been interesting to see how the sex ed thing has played out for some people. And it really seems like accidental, really good book purchases, when the parent wasn't reading through the book well enough, actually gave them more complete information than they thought they were going to get. Or they were little nerds like me, and we went to the library and looked stuff up.
Right.
But it's one of those things where the more you try not to think about an elephant, the more you're going to think about an elephant. And I see that I knew a family that were in the Institute of Basic Life Principles, the IBLP,
Oh
and they
yeah,
did the ATI
my
curriculum.
parents, they didn't do that, but they would go to the basic youth conflicts conferences,
Yes.
and bring back the life notebook for you. Where it's like, I got that as a birthday present once.
So,
I got that, and my brother got a Mattel Electronics football game. So who do you think got the better gift that
it's
year?
a ripoff. I noticed in these IBLP families, like the rules on the kids are so strict in a very pervy way. Like, you're not supposed to touch someone of the opposite sex, including your sibling, unless it's like part of chores or something. But, you're not supposed to just like randomly have physical contact with your siblings unless they are the same gender. You're also supposed to, if you're a girl at least, supposed to make sure that you dress modestly enough that you do not turn on your brothers. And it's like the very thought that you're placing in these kids' heads that they could potentially have some sort of
And
lust.
it goes all the way to the extreme of this. If you are assaulted in some way, it's your fault because somehow you tempted this good, upstanding man who's trying to do the right thing to do something to you because
Correct.
you were enticing him because you could see some of your neck or whatever.
And then you
Ridiculous.
get the invalidation of, oh, well, it wasn't really that bad. Like when the Duggar girls had to go on that Dateline or whatever it was, and did the big expose interviews talking about Josh's earlier in life crimes. And
Indiscretions.
yes, and they were basically coached to be like, oh, it was fine, it wasn't that traumatic, blah 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 blah. And of course, years later, when they're actually adults and not being manipulated because they've moved out from underneath mom and dad, they're like, no, that was really messed up and I'm not okay.
Hmm.
And
Right.
it's
Right.
I see this, I actually saw this a lot in my videos that I did about missions agencies, because there are a good number of missions agencies that at least recommend, if not require, that you send school age children to boarding schools so that way mom and dad missionary can actually focus on missionary stuff and not raising kids. So these kids get put in these boarding schools with people who are teaching them and overseeing things that have no background checks, and they get caught in sexual indiscretions with students, and they get sent back to America. They're given a couple weeks of counseling, and then they're sent back to the mission field to continue doing what they're doing. And this process was rinse and repeat for like 30 years before it finally like landed in mainstream media and actually got legal traction. They didn't actually have a law that handled the sexual assault of children in other countries unless the person was traveling there specifically and exclusively for the purpose of
For
abusing those children. And it was like 2009 when they finally actually got a law on the books that protects those children from people who are not there strictly for that purpose, but also to have a, like, facade purpose that they're there for.
hmm. Yeah.
And it's just so infuriating to me that they are so laser focused on protecting these children from worldly music or
Video
lust
games
for,
or
yeah, or lust
demonic
for
influence
your
or
boyfriend, or
yeah.
any of these number of things that should not be that big of a deal. The more you make a big deal out of them, the more people are going to want to do it. But they focus so much on that, and they leave them completely exposed for trafficking and abuse and domestic violence and codependency, and there's just all this stuff that is built in largely because of isolation. And you talk to most homeschoolers today, and a large number of them are doing it for secular purposes. The local school district completely sucks. They can't afford a private school, so they're doing homeschool. Or they move to a rural area and they need to online school. Or they have a kid with special needs, or any number of secular reasons to homeschool. So it's becoming less of the norm for it to be these restrictive religious things. But those of us that are in like our 30s, 40s, 50s, like the archaic edition of homeschool that we had was really just so wildly incapable of giving us the skills that we needed to interact with other people. We were great at interacting with God, just not with other people.
I can't disagree with anything you just said.
There's something that I was introduced to several years ago. It's dialectical behavioral therapy. And dialectics is based on the concept that there can be two competing concepts, ideas, perspectives that are true at the same time, even though they conflict with one another. It's not necessarily true that one is correct and one is wrong. And so all of us that I have talked to, looking back at our educational careers and how we transitioned into adulthood, and we can all pick out a number of things that were like, this was really messed up. This really held me back as an adult. But at the same time, we had great things that happened to us growing up. And so trying to makes sense of the confused emotions that you end up with looking backwards. And I mean, personally, I don't know how anybody does it without a therapist. I'm pretty sure most of us have therapists at this point. But, it's
Hasn't worked for me. I've tried it, but
yeah.
it's interesting. I was thinking because had no idea what this conversation was going to be about. I didn't look you up. I don't know. I just knew you were looking for ACE.
Yep.
But I was thinking that exact thing, because it's not like I grew up unhappy.
Right.
I laughed. I had friends. I would say that I had an enjoyable childhood, but I didn't know that I was being set up for failure. I didn't know that I don't know where you stand ideologically on religion, but that I was being taught a lie my entire life.
Yeah.
And then waking up, years later, not until my 30s, to realize all of this that when I started to become adult, I gave myself to 100% trusting and in faith, and just how cheated I felt. I was given the shaft, basically. It was like, and I felt there was a lot of anger there for a while. There was a lot of anger because I just felt cheated, and I had made all these decisions based on what I thought, based on who I trusted was true. And there was still, you can still look back and say, oh, I enjoyed this thing. And I liked, when we used to go to state conventions, because we were ACE all the way, and they had ACE state conventions, and then you'd have a national convention that would rotate. So we went to New York, we went to Texas, we went to Indiana, we went, all these different places, and that was all enjoyable and fun.
Oh, yeah.
You have to remind yourself, I think, sometimes when you start to really get angry about, is that, it wasn't all bad. And, like the other person said, misdirected love. My parents weren't lying to me. Mm-hmm. They weren't. I mean, they were. But
they truly believed it.
Yes. Right? So they're doing what they think is the best. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to do the right thing. One of the things I say frequently is like, all of our parents screw us up in a different way, and we just screw our kids up in a completely different way. Yep. So we don't do what they did, but we do something else.
Right, exactly.
But it's all the intention is support, love, to do the right thing. And in some of that, it turns twisted into isolation and protection against society and keeping information, hiding information and not talking about certain subjects, taboo things, or allowing yourself to even think, thought crimes.
Yes.
Things where just thinking something is evil, is bad, is a sin. If a man has
lusted against a woman in his heart, he has committed adultery with her already.
Why not just go commit adultery then? Because I can't help where my mind goes. If that's the case, then I may as well just, sometimes I wish I was Catholic so I could just go and
absolve
sin
yourself.
And then just go, oh, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
I'll do 50 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers.
And I'm good.
Correct. So one of the things that me and my friends would say in like high school was, if we were going to get in trouble for something, we were going to do it all the way. We said, if you're going to do the time, you may as well do the crime.
I was Mr. Goody Two-Shoes, so I
was I.
Obeying every single rule, that there was, trying to do the right thing. I didn't even take medicine. I didn't take aspirin or the first time I ever took an aspirin when I had a headache and it went away, I was like, what is hell?
This sorcery?
What is this? All my life, I've just been faith. And, I take a pill and it goes away. It's like, oh.
I'm It sounds like they did mostly pace as far as science was concerned, but did they ever bring in like Ken Ham, Answers in Genesis, Kent Hovind, anything like
So
that?
they had in like 45 minutes away, there was a conference where Ken Ham had a conference, and we
Hmm.
went to that. I was I was desperate to find something scientifically that proved what I was being told. I was desperate. I was so just thirsty
Yeah.
for it because there was nothing out there. I mean, it was all faith, 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 faith.
Yes.
And that Ken Ham conference just was like, I ate that up.
Yes.
I even convinced the school to buy the video cassettes version of, this whole creation series and books. I bought books and I got all that stuff. And I just devoured it.
Yeah.
And after, digging into it, it was like, this is, this doesn't make any more sense. I mean, it's like, this is why I can't go. I mean, I even called the Creation Institute one time to see, what was there something that I could come and take a class or get a
Right.
certification or something from the Creation Institute school, right?
Sure.
No, they don't have that. The Institute for Creation Research personally tried to, I wanted it.
Yeah.
But we didn't have anything. It was after my senior year by the time they bought this. So I don't know if they incorporated
Gotcha.
those cassettes into science or anything. But yeah, it didn't take long to realize that it was just not satisfying. The answers weren't satisfying
Yeah.
at all. They were not. They if you start with an answer, you're not gonna explore anything.
Right. Right.
Right. I
It
mean, I was told it's okay to question. It's okay to question, but
yes.
as long as you know the truth. As long as you realize that the truth is this, it's okay to question. But as soon as you start to, maybe feel like it's being challenged, no, you got to come back to this. So you can't question very far before you're
No.
back again.
Not at all. Because that was huge for me. My parents constantly told me, do not take anything that anyone tells you for granted. They were like, test it against the spirit for anything, whether it's a pastor, whether it's mom, whether it's dad, doesn't matter. Test everything. But then when I got older and I did do that, and I came to very different decisions and perspectives, it was suddenly not okay anymore. And I
Yeah, yeah.
clearly had strayed. I was
Well,
being
you didn't come up with the right
misled.
conclusion. You didn't come up with the right conclusion. So
Correct.
you're being deceived. So come back and don't start over. Just come back.
Correct. Correct. You should remember everything. You know, it's fine. You'll slip into that skirt again. It's fine.
But I was raised young Earth creationist. 6,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
The Noah's flood is something that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
All the things in the Bible where the Earth stood still. When
Mm-hmm.
I forget Aaron or somebody held up.
Yeah, I held up his arm, and like people were there, like helping hold it up so that way it would stay, so they could
They
maintain.
could
It had to do with a
sustain the
battle,
daylight.
and they needed to
Yeah, there was
keep
a
it
battle
light or
going on. They
dark.
needed to maintain the light so that the battle could conclude.
Right.
And so, okay, the easiest way to do that is just to stop the Earth's rotation. Oh, okay, great. Let's do that.
Yes, it's the amount of mental gymnastics that you end up doing, and you tell yourself at the time that it's the ineffable nature of God. I am not God, so therefore I cannot fully understand. So the fact that I have doubts and I am questioning, that is fine. Just a limitation of being human, and I just need to give it to God.
And the reasons for why bad things happen are a mystery because God is a mystery. If there's bad things or things don't make sense or there's contradictions, it's because God is a mystery. And maybe He's trying to help you build your faith. He's allowing these doubts so that somehow, instead of exploring more, instead you'll turn back into the faith.
Mm-hmm.
That would be good.
Because you're,
Ignorance is bliss. You know, the person who's demonized of the apostles is doubting Thomas.
mm-hmm,
He had to actually touch the and he was ridiculed for that.
yes. He's
That
been
you didn't
ridiculed for
just take the
millennia
faith.
for that.
You just didn't take it by faith.
Yeah.
You had to touch it. Why would you have to touch it and see it? Just by faith. I mean, it is such a mind control
Yes.
mechanism that it's those thought crimes again. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
demonized because I am exploring to see, what's true in the world.
Yes. I've been reading the men's manuals from IBLP, and there's so much about how the father needs to control what books, magazines, music, movies, TV, friends, all this stuff needs to be carefully filtered so you don't let a bad influence plant seed thoughts.
So
And
when I was a kid, I was in grade school. My great grandpa bought us for Christmas. We went to his house for Christmas, and it was the coolest book on dinosaurs. It was a National Geographic hardcover.
oh, nice.
It disappeared. The only time I ever saw it was when we opened it up at great grandpa's house. It disappeared. It taught an old Earth. It taught an old universe. It
Yeah.
taught, and so they just got rid of it. They just got rid of it. I've confronted my parents about it since then, and they're like, I don't remember. I don't remember.
Oh, of
It's
course.
like, of course not. How come I had it for Christmas but didn't have it any time after that?
Yeah. I didn't lose it. I was obsessed with dinosaurs when I was a kid, and we went to tons of dinosaur museums and attractions and stuff. And we'd be walking around to these different dinosaur exhibits, and I'd be reading the placards that's up there talking about, it existed from 15 million to 30 million years ago, and it was during the, whatever Ific period, and, predated man by 12 million years or something. And my parents would be there telling me, actually, this is what happened. And,
Yep, yep.
correcting everything as we went through. Same thing would happen at like the Museum of Natural History. We'd get to anything that even referenced evolution or anything old Earth, and they were in there correcting it, and there it was so hard to rectify, like, okay, well, the preponderance of evidence says this.
Yeah, why would it be in this museum with all these scientists? And well, I didn't realize what it took to get a PhD at that,
Yeah.
at that age. But the specialization and all that, and they're all agreeing, hundreds, if not thousands, agreeing on maybe not every scintilla of detail, but the general story. Oh, but my mom knows.
My Sunday school teacher totally knows.
Yeah. So, what is the purpose of this that you have
Yeah,
for
so
these for what you're doing here?
I've been kind of building on things. I started talking about the history of the church and the history of the Bible, and just kind of laying the groundwork for these are the major movements within Protestant Christianity, and these are the main beliefs and how they changed through time up to what we have as our current day denominations. And then I went into a little bit of the communications that are given to Christian children, things like Adventures in Odyssey and Salty the Singing Songbook, and
Oh, I was salty.
yes. So, went over those and kind of talked about the negative messages that were coming through that. And then I had asked my followers, I was like, going forward, I've got two ideas. I was like, I can dig into homeschooling and just kind of fundy curriculum, or I can take a look at specific doctrines that I want to break down as a like deconstructioners type thing. And they overwhelmingly said homeschool. So I was like, okay. So then I reached out for, as many volunteers as I could get to talk about homeschooling, whether their parents did it. And then I've kind of branched out a little bit. I've had some people that, you were in a Christian school. I had another girl who was in a Christian school, but they used the same curriculum. And so I'm kind of comparing and contrasting how things came out from a classroom setting with that same curriculum versus someone who was in a home setting and had that curriculum. And what I am seeing come out is that the curriculum had a lot more to do with it than the setting that they were in. Because the parents that choose curriculum like that are the parents who are going to choose isolation and protectionism, and the parents that are more interested in academics and ensuring that their children are meeting benchmarks, they're picking different curriculum. And so even if they are homeschooled, they're coming out with better outcomes. And so I think we're finding a really interesting crossroads of trying to understand how to allow religious freedom but still protect children from things like educational neglect and religious trauma. Obviously, we can't force people to not believe certain things. I mean, that's very unconstitutional. But at the same time, we need to somehow have, as a society, certain protections that are put in place to ensure that children are progressing as they're learning with whatever curriculum they happen to have picked, but, making sure that they are meeting certain benchmarks and that they are actually understanding the material and not just teaching to a test and doing Scantron really well. So I really want to bring more conversation about these environments and the repercussions of them, because especially on YouTube, like 90% of what you see if you search homeschool is homeschooling moms talking about how successful XYZ is in homeschool. And so I really want to contribute to the conversation and bring some actual student perspectives on this, specifically because it's my niche, specifically in the, fundamentalist Christian segment of homeschooling. I'm not an educational expert. I do not have a master's in pedagogy or anything. So I'm not here to really criticize secular homeschoolers, folks that use actual accredited curriculum and whatnot. I'm not here to say they're necessarily doing anything wrong. I do, however, want to call attention to the Christian dominionism, the Christian nationalism, the purity culture, the just disconnect from what especially teens need to mature and be able to have a successful adult life without a really rough transition period. So I really just want to get as many perspectives on this type of education as I can, just to try and drive a bigger conversation of how we can improve things within the homeschool community, because it's not going anywhere. Our representatives are entirely too excited about defunding the public school and putting money into parental choice, so that way discriminatory religious schools can get federal tax dollars. Yeah. I think it, similar to like the drug war, you've got to work and focus on harm reduction. So just, even if we can make other homeschoolers, without even getting to the homeschool parents, but other homeschoolers to understand that if they are in it and they are struggling, it's not them. And I have been making sure to, on each and every one of these videos, have a list of resources for both continuing education, Job Corps, mental health services, things like that. There isn't enough of that available readily online to locate the continuing education that you might need when
So
you missed
how
out in
how
high
do you
school.
get followed online? How do you get followed? How could
So
I, for example, follow you?
yeah, absolutely. So I am obviously on Reddit. You can follow me there. I typically will post on my personal page and in a few different subreddits whenever I have a new video going live or if I have a new project that I'm working on. I am also on YouTube. I am at Deconstructing DJ Ghetto Steve. And then I'm also on Instagram as at DJ Ghetto Steve. So I'm in a few different places. I kind of have a TikTok, but not really.
I'm the cusp of a baby boomer, so
Yeah,
I can just claim I don't know how to use it.
right? Well, I happen to be an elder millennial or a zennial, depending on where you want to put it in there. Like I'm almost Gen X, so I've got all the cynical saltiness, but like a millennial, I have actually managed to somewhat keep up with technology, sort of. What I've been rounding everything out with is for any other homeschoolers that are out there that are currently teenagers, early 20s, making that transition into the real world, what kind of advice do you have for them?
That's good. That's an interesting question. Well, everyone's going to be different in how they interact, right? So your confidence, keep your confidence. And when you run into something that slaps you in the face as that's not what I thought, be open to learning and adapting because that's what you're going to have to do. You're either going to have to adapt or you're going to have to go back in your bubble.
Yeah.
So be a lifelong learner and be ready to be wrong all the time and be open to being wrong. You want to know the most true things that you can possibly know and not believe the most wrong things as possible. You want to lean toward that truth. So if something contradicts something that you held firm and the evidence, the more you look into it, becomes more and more overwhelming, the likelihood is you might have been misled. You might have been misled. So, yeah, just be open and don't beat yourself up. You're still a great person. You're
Yes.
still also bright. You're still, I was the top of my class, but I only had a class of one.
Yep.
So,
Same.
yeah, I think that's what I'd say.